This is Three Crosses Hill in Kazimierz Dolny. In is probably not the correct word. This is above Kazimierz Dolny, and it has these fantastic views over the town, as you can see now. And there you have almost all of Kazimierz in one image. Absolutely outstanding view in my opinion, and gives a good look at this Renaissance town. I use the word Renaissance because it's retained its Renaissance look. This town grew largely in the 16th and first half of the 17th centuries. Most of the buildings we can see are from the first half of the 17th century, and particularly, for example, there we have in the market square is the building, although I'm looking at the back of it here rather than the front, but that's from 1613. I use that as one example, but buildings behind it which are quite remarkable, such as this one there. I think that's 1633 if I remember rightly. And these buildings were made for wealthy people who earned their money on the grain trade. There were once 60 grain warehouses in this town. Only 11 have survived to today, and they're obviously not used for grain anymore, haven't been used for grain for 300 years. They are instead used for other things, housing, and more recently hotels. The river itself didn't follow the course it does today, but it took a more easterly route, that is to say closer to where I am standing now, more or less along the route which I am focusing in on now, and that's why the grain warehouses are somewhat from the river today. This place is also known as the Vistula Gorge, and standing from here you get a good impression of it being a gorge with the hills on either side, but when you're on the ground it doesn't really give that impression at all. Kazimierz was also the site of a quarry which is down there. Rocks which were formed around 70 million years ago, when this area was about a kilometre under water, and the rocks themselves were mined until 1981, and many of the buildings, if not nearly all of the buildings, were actually made of stone from that period. That's of course those that are not made from wood. We've got around here, we've got the castle, which dates back to the 15th century, and behind that we can just see it poking through the trees is the tower which overlooked the river, and you got some fantastic views from up there as well. I've filmed that in other films. So with these three enormous churches which we can see from up there, such as there, the first one, and coming around there's another one, and finally we have this one down here as well, and we also have the synagogue, or former synagogue I should say, which is down there, and the majority of the population was in fact Jewish until the Second World War. So the Catholics, of the minority, had these huge churches, and the Jews, of the majority, had this tiny place, but that was, I'm sure, more than sufficient for their requirements. Jewish population was unfortunately murdered in 1942. The beauty of the place, however, was also recognised even by the SS, who normally went around destroying things, but in this case they wanted to turn this town into some kind of SS resort or something like that. That didn't happen. Now, the reason the town maintained its look from the 17th century was because after the Swedish wars, the Baltic was actually cut off. Gdansk, which was the port to which the grain was exported, was no longer in Poland. It became in Germany. And when later, after the wars with Sweden were over, the markets in Western Europe were lost, so the grain trade was effectively dead, and people just left the place. Therefore the houses and what have you were maintained their look. They were maintained, but new stuff wasn't really built, and that is why it looks the way it does today. Some of the buildings in the main square and other places were damaged or even destroyed during the Second World War. In 1944, that was the front line. From August to January 1945, that was the front line. So there was shelling, and I believe it was actually destroyed by Wehrmacht shelling and not by Soviet shelling. Destroyed some of the buildings. They were of course rebuilt, and you can't really tell which ones they were today. Or at least I can't. I'm sure an expert could. And one thing Kazimierz is noted for is its ravines, and this is one along here, although it's not as sort of narrow as some of them, but we get an impression of a valley going across there. There are some really quite wonderful deep ravines, sorry, deep by Polish standards, going through the hills to the south in direction of Kazimierz, where I'm living. Now, when I finish, I'll tell you about these three crosses, which were built here, I think they've been in the 16th century, as thanks after a bout of the plague or some other problem which afflicted the town. I suspect around here may also have been actually used as a graveyard as well. It's quite high getting up here, and it's quite steep as well. It's 90 metres above the town, and it's about 160 metres above sea level, although the seas are very long way from here, but the town isn't, and those 90 metres up are really quite steep.